Today we're going to be talking about career communication and how work and education are connected. We're going to focus specifically on doing a resume, and we'll have some bonus material related to a cover letter that you can review on your own. We're talking about career communication because, as many of you shared in your journals, one of the big reasons you're in college is to try and get a career that you love. And in order to get a career that you love, or find out what career you love, you need to know a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the job market, and you need to have materials that will get you the job. Okay, so we're going to talk about resumes. So it is one of your homeworks that you're going to do a resume. I'm not expecting a perfect resume. It's going to be a draft, but I am expecting you to adhere to the guidelines that I put forward here. Don't just turn in your old resume, and don't go on the internet and look for that, because what I'm teaching you now is specifically tailored to you. Students have a certain way of doing a resume. There's also an up-to-date industry-led formatting options. You can't know exactly what an employer will want, but we generally use best practices for how to format your resume. So I expect to see that in your homework results. And also, this is going to be much more helpful for you to get a job if you do it the way I put forward versus if you just do it from some random website on the internet. So the purpose of a resume is to market you. You are selling yourself to an employer, and you are basically selling yourself for an interview. You're trying to get an interview. It identifies who you are and what your skills, education, and experience are. And you have to think about it in terms of what you offer the employer. So you want to think about, what does this employer want and what can I offer them? So it is something where you want to not just send out the same resume every time. It is not a complete personal history. So sometimes you'll be asked to fill out an application which says, please put all your jobs in the last 10 years or 12 years or whatever. That is not what a resume is for. A resume is to highlight the things that are most relevant to this position. So you're not going to put everything on a resume, or you don't have to put everything on a resume. You're going to use keywords that relate to the job description. So every time you write a resume, it should be based in the job description, not just the same resume sent out. So you'll adjust your keywords accordingly. So general guidelines, resumes are 1 page long. They should not be 2 pages long unless you have a lot of experience. So if you're a reentry student and you've worked in industry for some time, it might be okay to have a 2-page resume, but I would challenge you to try and get it down to 1 page, because employers average about 30 seconds on their first review of a resume. So they are looking at it really quickly. They're going to kind of hit all the points, see where you land in terms of your experience and your skills, and decide if you're going to go in the yes, no, or maybe pile pretty quickly. They'll probably review it again at a little bit more length, but that first making the cut happens very quickly. So that also makes it so you're going to want to make it easy to read, because they are reading it so quickly. And I don't know about you guys, but every time I get an email that is dense with text, I don't want to read it. So you can imagine somebody looking at 50, 60 resumes. They're not going to want to look at something that is so badly formatted or has so much text that it's just overwhelming. So you want to use your white space well. It is good to have space in between your jobs, and don't fill every nook and cranny with text. It should be about 10 to 12 point font for the body of the resume, and your name is the only thing that should be a different font size, and it would be 20 to 22 point font. You should adjust your font size based on the font you choose. Some fonts are smaller than others. So remember, you might have, older eyes, or people with, not as great vision as you looking at your resume. So you want it to be readable for anybody who looks at it. Tense is the present versus past tense. There is some variation with this with a resume, but generally you want to be consistent. So pick a tense and stick with it. I generally suggest people do everything in present tense, because it sounds very active. Even if you're not still at that job, you can still use present tense for everything. Important content should be at the top and at the left because we read top to bottom, left to right. So you want to hit them with the things that are most important or most impressive first if you can. A resume should be in reverse chronological order. So this means you start with your most recent job and you work backwards from there, or your most recent education and work backwards from there. So at the top is the most recent one, the thing you're doing now or the thing you just finished doing, and then everything else goes backwards. Use standard fonts, Arial, Times New Roman, Veranda's okay. Don't use anything funky or swirly. You want it to be easy to read. Do not use a template. Templates online or Word templates are not designed with you in mind. They're designed with a broad audience in mind, and sometimes they're actually outdated or not appropriate for the circumstances. So, you have unique needs and the job has unique needs. You're going to want to adjust your resume based on that, and templates can really get in the way of that. Resume has very specific grammatical guidelines that are different than writing an email or a paper. And so you're going to need to follow these guidelines to make it appropriate. So when you're talking about the job and you're describing the work you did in past jobs, you're going to begin each duty or accomplishment that you're describing with an action verb. So you don't say, I managed a group of 5. You say, managed a group of 5. Or you don't say, I designed a new approach to the program. You say, designed new approach to the program. So those action verbs, manage, design, and there are a lot of other ones. You're always going to start with those. You do not refer to yourself. You do not say I, me, we. There's no subject in a resume. So that example you see on the right where it says, what do I have to offer? I'm good with people. I wear your clothes. All of that's really bad, first of all. But second of all, they're referring to themselves. You do not do that. You need to be consistent in your tense, as I mentioned earlier. All past or all present. That's what I would recommend is all present. But again, you can go all past if you prefer that. You're going to want to quantify your accomplishments. So what this means is give actual numbers. Even if you don't have an exact number, give a ballpark, because then employers can go, oh, that's how many. Or I have a general sense of what the accomplishment was. If it's really small, maybe you only manage 2 people, then maybe you leave that number out because maybe they would think it's more than that. But if it's a good amount, 5 people, whatever, you're going to want to tell them that because that is an accomplishment. So instead of saying very many or some, say over 200, up to 50, an average of 10. You may not always have those numbers, just do it when you can. It, as I said, is a sales document or a marketing document. So students have a really bad habit of saying assist or help because they may not have been the #1 person on a task. So for example, if you were in a research lab and you're a research assistant, you are not necessarily the person running that, but you don't want to say assisted with implementing study participant interviews. Well, didn't you implement study participant interviews? Just because somebody else was in charge of it doesn't mean you didn't do it. So you want to don't say assist unless it is totally crucial for you to say that. So here's a sample basic resume, and this just gives you an idea of the format. I know it's hard to read and it's not really the point. I want you to see how it's set up. So here you'll see, the heading, and we'll talk in more detail about this, but basically you want to have your name, contact information, that's just email and phone number, and at least the city where you live. Objective, we'll talk about this in a minute, but that will always go at the top if you choose to have one. Then you go into education. So this is where it's really important for you to know that this is different than what some of the templates you might see. All students should have education at the top because that is your biggest selling point. Generally, you don't have a lot of experience, so your education is going to be something that employers are looking for. You might choose to include relevant coursework if that will help you get the job or you think it will. You generally have the skills or summary qualifications section. This one actually has both, and this is particular because they're in a lab. They're applying for a laboratory position, so specifically lab skills is something that they wanted to show off, and then they wanted to talk at a little bit more length about what kind of qualifications they have, but generally you're going to pick one or the other. And then they go into the experience section, and this is where you have your old jobs. Include your current job as well if you are currently working. So you have the job title, company name, the dates, and you usually have the location. So here they have UC Davis. They just use that as a location, but this one's Davis, California. Then activities and leadership. So these are sort of optional sections we'll talk more about in community service. So you can see kind of how it's set up. Nice use of white space. Nice use of bold, all the same font, all the same font size, except for the name, which is bigger. So here are some other examples. And you can kind of see how they're set up. So this is different, but this is still a legitimate resume. So you see it's different because they have a bachelor's degree and an associate's degree. They use skills only. Their experience section is set up a little bit differently. They have 2 lines instead of 1. And so the date, it's got all the same info. It's got the dates and the job title and the company information and location, but it's not on one line. They included a languages section because it was important for what they're applying for. They had a volunteer section and an awards section. So optional sections that they chose to include. So I'm going to go through the categories that you would put on your resume. So standard categories that pretty much everyone will have on their resume. And you need your name and contact information, of course, because people need to contact you. So at the very least, name, email, phone number, and you generally only at least include the city you're in, or you can include your full address. It's up to you based on security reasons whether you include your full address or not. Objective. So an objective is basically saying this is what I'm applying for. So you list job title at company name. So marketing intern at ABC Marketing. It is not something really long, so you see some examples sometimes online that say, my objective is to apply my excellent communication skills and my creativity to an environment that allows me to grow. That is outdated. You do not want to put that. It's taking up very valuable real estate on that one page you have. If you put an objective at all, make it simple. It is optional. So this is completely up to you. It can be very helpful if your resume gets separated and people are wondering what you're applying for, or if maybe they have a variety of open positions and they ask you to identify what job you're applying for, then you may want to include it. Or if you're going to career fair, so that when you talk to people, they know what kind of thing you're applying for. But if you're running out of room, it's something where you can get rid of that section. You will always have an education section, and at the very least, this is going to be the title of the degree you're going for, or the degree you already have, the date you're going to graduate or the date you already graduated, and the institution where you got the degree. So let's say you're getting an associate's degree in sociology. I would say Associate of Arts in Sociology, American River College, expected graduation May 2020. Or something like that, and I'll show you some examples of what that looks like. There are some other things you can include if you want. You can include relevant coursework, honors. If you've studied abroad, you probably want to include that. You can also include your GPA if you like. We generally say anything below 3.2, don't put it on there, but anything above 3.2 or above is a selling point. So community college, if you are not getting an associate's degree here, after like a while after you transfer, you don't have to include the community college on there. This is because you don't actually have a degree from the community college. If you're getting a degree here, you generally want to include that. For now, because every single one of you is in community college, you have not yet transferred, you are going to include your community college time, always. It's just optional after you transfer and you're pursuing another degree. You can just indicate that degree if you just did transfer coursework to get to where you're going. You will always have an experience section. So experience doesn't mean paid jobs necessarily. It means paid and unpaid work that would show that it relates to the field and show that you have the skills and abilities you need to be able to get the job done. So this could be internships, volunteering that wasn't just like a couple of weekends, something that's a little bit more long-term, and even in some cases it could be sort of bigger, more in-depth school projects, or if you were a titled position in a campus organization where you did a good amount of work, you didn't just go to meetings, that actually can be under experience if you are scraping the bottom of the barrel to get experience. So some folks don't have a lot of things to put on their resume, and that's when you start including things like being an officer in a club or a school project. If you have a lot of experience already, you don't really need to put that under experience. You might put it under activities or community service or something like that, and we'll talk more about that later. So some optional categories, skills or summary qualifications. These are highly recommended that you put them on there. You don't have to. I generally pick one or the other. The difference between the two is that skills is pretty short and to the point, and it's better if you have some technical skills to put forward. Summary qualifications is more sentence structure, and it's kind of focused on how much experience you have, and it's a little bit longer. So it kind of just depends on your experience in the job, which one you pick. But I recommend doing these because this is a very quick, sort of in-your-face way of saying, hey, I have all those things that you want me to have. So you're going to look at the job description, and if they say, okay, we want this, you say, I have that. By putting it in your skills or summary qualifications, you basically can respond to that job description in that section. And it's a very easy place to put that. Also, it's sort of the only place to put skills that you've gained through your education, because you don't get to describe the classes you've taken. Even if you do a relevant coursework section, you don't get to describe each one. And generally, you gain skills in your classes. This is a great place to put it. So, for example, if you're applying for a laboratory position and you learn how to pipette in one of your lab classes, you would put pipetting under skills, even though you haven't done it in a job setting yet. And so that's why this is a really powerful section. So you can have an activities section. That's a nice catch-all for things that you've done outside of your education. I'm not talking about things like playing video games or pick-up games of football with your buddies. I'm talking about more formal activities that you do, music lessons or clubs on campus, or if you're on a team, a sports team on campus, that can go under activities. Education abroad would generally go under your education section, sort of as a subsection. Community service can be a section. So if you do community service that you're not going to use as your experience section, so maybe it was something you just volunteered a couple weekends, or maybe you have a lot of experience, you don't need to put it, or it's just completely irrelevant. Let's say you're applying for a sales position and you've done some dog walking at the ASPCA, and it doesn't really help you in terms of transferable skills, but you want to say, look how involved I am with the community, then you would probably put that under a community service section. Leadership, that can be, if you don't want to use some of your leadership roles under your experience, because you have enough experience, you can do things like, if you're an officer in a club, or if you're a team captain, a sports team, or something like that, can go in your leadership. Projects. So this is really a saving grace for people who do not have any internship or volunteer or other kind of experience. And this is basically things you've done in your education, or even outside of your education, if you did a project on your own, where it can demonstrate some of the skills they're looking for, but it's not really in a paid position or a volunteer position outside of your education. So it has to be something that wasn't just kind of a quick homework. It has to be, this went over several weeks. It may be culminated in a large paper or research project or a big presentation. So you don't want to just put a homework, but this can help you if you don't have a lot of experience. Publications, I'm guessing most of you aren't published, but if you do end up getting published alongside, a PhD who's doing some research or something like that, you will want to include that. And finally, research. So this can, a lot of the times if you do research, you're going to put it under experience, but you can also have a separate research section. The other thing to know is you can actually combine these sections. So let's say you have one community service thing and one leadership thing, but you really want to say both of them, but you think it's overkill to have a separate section for just one thing, you can actually combine it. So you can say community service and leadership, or leadership and community service, and then list both of them under one section with a double heading like that. Or you could do activities and community service, or leadership and research or something like that. So you can really kind of combine them. So you may have heard of other resume formats, but the one you really should be using is a chronological resume format. So this is what I said earlier about you have it in reverse chronological order and you list the experiences that you've done. It's easiest to write because you're just listing out experiences. It's easiest to read for employers because they really understand what your background is and the chronology of your background. And that's really what employers prefer. They don't love other resume formats. So here's a sample of a chronological resume. So you can see each job is listed in reverse chronological order. We don't have actual dates here. We have X's, so it can be adjusted from year to year. But let's assume it's going most recent job to oldest job there. So that is reverse chronological resume, just standard. There is an option to categorize your chronological resume. So let's say like 3 years ago, you did a job that relates perfectly to the job you're applying for. And unfortunately, if you do a standard chronological resume, it's going to be kind of far down on the page. So your option here is to do what's called a modified chronological resume. And it has these sort of functional areas like let's say it was a research position you're applying for and you did some research assistant role like 3 years ago. You can say research experience, and then your other section could be other relevant experience or some other kind of category, so that you can really pull that experience up high and emphasize it and show them, hey, I have this kind of experience right at the top of your resume. So it does need to be in chronological order within the categories, though. So if you did 2 research positions, for example, you can't put the old one above the new one. You have to do the most recent one, then the oldest one within the category. So that, you're still sticking to the chronological format. So this is an example of a modified chronological format. So what you see here is it's not just experience, it's research experience. And then they have laboratory animal handling experience. So they might be applying for a position where they have to do lab animal work. And then they have one, and I never want to see you guys use this title. I'm using the example because it's a good example, but this should never be the heading, position held to finance education. Just write other relevant experience, or in this case, it could be service experience or customer service experience or something like that. You really want to kind of tailor your categories to what the job wants. So research experience, and then within the category they have 2, and they're presumably in reverse chronological order, and then they have 1 under this one, and then another under the last category. So you really want to tailor your resume every single time. You should not ever turn in the same resume to a different job unless the job is pretty much exactly the same as the last one you applied for. You should at the very least change your skills and summary qualifications section every single time. But I recommend making tweaks to the keywords that you're using and the way you structure things and potentially the order of your bullet points throughout the resume. So you definitely should be doing a little work on a resume every time you apply for a job. Employers know, they can tell if you're sending the same resume out because they know it's not tailored to them. And the little bit of time that you take to tailor it makes it much more likely that you get the job. The other thing that's really important about this is that sometimes the first person to look at your resume is not the person who gets to choose who gets hired. They're just a human resources professional whose job is to screen out people who are not qualified. So they don't know a ton about the job. So you want to use the information from the job description very clearly in your resume so that they can see these keywords and go, okay, yeah, they're hitting all these points, and I'm going to push them forward to the actual hiring manager to review. If it isn't clear, like extremely clear with the same exact wording in your resume that you're qualified for the job, you might never get pushed forward to the hiring manager because people aren't going to understand You said charcoal cardigan, but they're looking for gray sweater, right? Never say charcoal cardigan if the job description says gray sweater. Always say gray sweater, okay? So it's all about tailoring it to the position. So there is some structure in terms of how you order your sections. You're not going to put your activities first generally, but in terms of community service and some of the other optional sections, you are going to adjust them based on what's most important for the job. So this is a sample job description. I want you to take a minute and look through it based on what I said about, tailoring the resume to each job, and see if you can highlight some of the keywords and phrases that you might use in your resume. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can identify some, and then we'll come back and discuss it further. Okay. So I'm guessing most of you found some of these, but you're going to look through the whole thing. You don't want to just look through the experience or the list of qualifications that they're looking for. So you'll see here, okay, telephone desk reception. So if you've ever done telephone work, you want to include that. Sales, they mentioned sales. So if you have sales experience, you definitely want to mention that. Booking appointments. If you, again, have experience with that, you want that on there. So you probably don't have a background in specifically group exercise materials, but, maintaining materials might be something you could include. Administrative duties is a big part of what this job is about. So what they want you to have experience with is health promotion. So this is teaching people about health, nutrition, and fitness. So if you have any of that, you probably want to highlight those. Let's see. And the rest of it is pretty much just logistics. And this you can really usually put in your cover letter. But these are some of the big keywords that you're going to want to include there. I missed one, daily operations. So if you have operations background or management background too, that might be keywords that you would use. So this is what you should do with a job description the minute you get it, is to highlight these keywords and phrases and think about how your background has transferable skills that relate to these. So you may not have done sales in a fitness environment, or you may not have booked appointments, but you may have managed someone else's calendar. So those are transferable skills that you can use in your resume based on what the job is looking for. All right, so I'm going to go through some formatting options for your resume, and I just want to show you the variety of things that you can potentially do, and there's probably even more that would be fine for you to do in terms of how you format each section of your resume. However, there are a lot of wrong ways to format your resume. So everything I'm showing you is correct, and you have these options, and I'm giving you some variety here. So you can see with some of these, this is just the heading, your name and contact information. So this one, they have it sort of spread out on either side of the page, so they have it just evenly spaced. They chose to only do their city and zip code, which is generally done to preserve your privacy. I really recommend doing this if you're posting your resume publicly on public sites online. You probably don't want to put your full address there. This one, they did more of a paragraph format with some bullet points, dividing them. This is actually from Symbols, so you can go to Symbols and get this. It's a nice way to divide up information. And they have this center justified. This one, they have two addresses here. The only time you want to include two addresses is when you are maybe applying for a summer position and you're either okay at being near campus or back in your hometown. So this lets the employer know that you're flexible with that. But generally, you're going to put one address. So this is kind of a rare thing. Then they just have their stuff listed, stacked on top of each other. And in this case, they chose to include a LinkedIn link. Do not include a LinkedIn link unless your LinkedIn is really good. This is a left justified option. So it's on the left side of the page. Divided up the address into two lines. Pretty simple, pretty standard. So education, you have a lot of ways of doing your education section. A very basic education section would be the first one, where you have Associate of Arts and Economics, and then May 2020 and then American River College, Sacramento, California. You do not have to put the location, but if you have the room, you don't want to put your GPA here or something, that's a good thing to include. So you are always going to say the full name of the degree. So don't put AA in economics or majoring in economics. You're going to put Associate of Arts in, or Associate of Science in, or Associate of Arts for transfer in. You're always going to list it out like that. You are also always going to include the month you're going to graduate. So this obviously is in the future, 2020. You do not have to put expected graduation if you don't want to, but if you like that, you can put expected graduation May 2020. Employers know if it's in the future, you're still a student, but it's up to you. Here's another way of doing it on the second box, so the second section, Associate of Arts in Economics, comma, American River College, comma, Sacramento, California, and then they have the up and down line, which you can get on your keyboard to divide out the date, and then they put May 2020, so they put it all in one line, so that's perfectly fine. And then they chose to include relevant coursework. If you include relevant coursework, do not put HCD 310. An employer does not know what HCD 310 is. You do not need to include that. You would say college success. So you actually put the names of the classes that you've taken. Do not put every class that you've taken. You only want to put classes that are relevant to the kind of job you're applying for. Okay, and at this point you may not have a whole lot of those, so you don't really have to include this section. So here's another option. The third one, you have American River College on top. If you have a degree that isn't super relevant to the job, you may want to put the institution on top, or in the case that you are not actually majoring in something, you're not getting an associate's degree or a certificate from American River College, generally you want to put the community college on top, because you would write something like transfer coursework in economics. So you're transferring for an economics degree, but you're not actually getting a degree from American River College. So transfer coursework in economics, or if you're doing such, transfer coursework in such, whatever it is. You have a GPA here, so as I mentioned, 3.2 or above, it's a selling point. Why not include it? So they chose to put it across from the college. And then anticipated transfer date. And this is important because you're not actually graduating from American River College, you are transferring somewhere else, so you would put anticipated transfer date. So that's important in this one, you actually write that out, you can't just put the time that you're doing it. If you've been admitted to another university, you're still at American River College, but you've been admitted to UC Davis, you can put UC Davis, Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, if that's what you're pursuing, for example, and then your expected grad date for that, and that would come above, on top of American River College. But you're going to want to still include American River College until you're actually set foot on campus at Davis or whatever other institution you're going to. Once you set foot on campus there, you can actually take off the community college experience if you want to, because you didn't actually get a degree from there. So here's an example of a degree next to the on top of an associate's degree. So Bachelor of Science in International Relations with a concentration in World Trade and Development. So sometimes when you get a degree, you're going to have a concentration. So this is the way you would set it up. Or an emphasis, they sometimes call it, and then they spaced out the institution name, the GPA, and the graduation date, and took 3 little bits on the bottom, and then they have their Associate of Arts in Economics, and then they spaced that out for American River College. So once you transfer, this is how you might set it up, so that's an option for you. You're not quite there yet, but I want to give you the information you need to do your resume once you transfer, because I know most of you want to transfer and you may not get this information from any of your other classes. So I'm going to give this to you for the future. This should not be how you set up your resume assignment. You need to set it up based on your current circumstances, but I do want to just give you the information. So the first one you can see as sort of that basic setup. This is the bachelor's degree version of the previous basic setup. This one you have on the second line, you have Bachelor's of Science in Economics, and you have across from it University of California, Davis. And actually, there's a little mistake here. This should be a month right here before 2013. And then you have the relevant courses in this sort of column format. This is an example of a double major. So you can major in two, you can get 2 degrees. So if you're double majoring, you're going to list them on top of each other because that makes it most impressive. Like, look at these 2 different degrees I'm getting. And then you have the institution you're getting from them and when you're actually anticipating graduating with them. Bachelor's of Science, this one you're going to see another one with an emphasis. Bachelor of Science in Economics with a concentration in international policy, and then they sort of spread out the GPA, graduation date, and institution. And then this relevant course section is a good one if you don't have a lot of space. So you kind of have this hanging indent here, and then the listed courses. So lots of ways to do education. This is for an experience section. This is a sample. You are always going to have a job title, a company name, the location of that company, and the dates. And this must include months, because if you just put years, it could be, December 2018 to January 2019. It could be almost just a month. So you need the months there so an employer knows actually how long you were there. And then you're always going to have either bullet points, or you can do a paragraph, but I would highly recommend bullet points because it's just much easier to read for an employer. They're looking for, sales. If I have to see it in the middle of a paragraph, it's going to be much harder to find than if I just look straight down these bullet points and go, oh, there we go, sales. So these are examples of how you write the bullet points, so please take time to read them. I'm not going to read them to you, but you can see that each one starts with an action verb: collaborate, make. We use, this is the same. It's just a different way of setting up: collaborate, make, use, sales. And they are very clear. A team of 8, so that's quantifying it. Outreach to potential advertising clients via phone, email, and in-person communication. So you're thinking about transferable skills here, right? You might not be applying for a place that's like Yelp, but you want them to know that you can deal with clients in a variety of communication approaches: phone, email, and in person. So there's another way to set it up here under the second section. Instead of having it all on one line, you have the job title here, and you bolded the job title, then the company name is underneath it, then the dates are across from it. You can either use tabs or you can space bar it over until it falls off, and backspace one, and then the location. So this is a really beautiful way to set it up, but it's not that great if you don't have a lot of room, because it takes 2 lines instead of 1. So this just kind of depends on how much room you have, and then all this text is the same here. So you can put the company name first, but you have to be consistent. So if you choose to do company name first, you have to do it first for all, or if you choose to do job title first, you have to do it first for all, and generally you bold the one that you want to highlight. To help you choose which to do first, well, if your job titles are really relevant to the job you're applying for, you probably want to highlight your job titles. But if they're not, you might want to highlight the company, particularly if it's an impressive and well-known company. Or if you're, the janitor at Google, you may want to put Google first, or if you're the CEO of unknown company, you may want to put CEO first. So pick one, and you have to stick with it. So this is another example of how to set up experience section. So this one, you have it kind of spaced out to 3 instead of 2 lines, or just all kind of stuck together on 1 line. And then this example here shows you what you might do if you had a promotion. So they started as a sales clerk from March 2011 to December 2012, and they got promoted to the night manager. So by putting them on top of each other, you can kind of see that promotion. So there are a lot of different ways of doing the skills section. This is all sort of the basic same information you're seeing here, but you can do it either in categories. If you're doing categories, this can actually be one of the hardest ways to do it because you have to figure out a category for all your skills, but it works really well for this person who has specific software skills and languages that they know. If you are doing languages, do say, what your level of fluency is, if you can. If it's basic, if you barely speak it, don't put it on your resume. I mean, I speak a tiny bit of high school French. I'm not going to put that on my resume. You need to actually be able to use it in your job in some way. The skills summary, this is more, similar to summary qualifications, but a little bit maybe shorter and more skill focused, and it's kind of written in a sentence format. And then finally, you have this sort of column setup where they just list the skills without actually categorizing them, which is fine. So you have a bonus section for cover letters. And I'm not actually going to walk you through it because this is a lot of content. We're already at 35 slides, so I don't want you to totally get bored, and it's not actually crucial that you learn about cover letters for this particular class. But if you are interested, I wanted to give you the information because you absolutely do need a cover letter every time you apply for a job. Even if they don't ask for a cover letter, you should submit a cover letter. It's called a cover letter because it's supposed to be the cover for your resume, and they are extremely important. If another candidate submits a cover letter and you don't submit the cover letter, who do you think they're going to consider? The person who put the effort in to do a cover letter. It also allows you to sort of tell your story a little bit more and round yourself out and sometimes talk about things that you can't really get on that resume. And it allows you to make the connection for the employer between your experience and what they're looking for. So it makes it much more clear for them, how your experience relates to the job, where a resume can really only talk about skills and accomplishments and duties that you did in your job. So take on your own time, go ahead and look through cover letters if you want. But that concludes our presentation on career communication.